Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. It's 2023 and the Ryzen 5600 and 5600X are still providing insane value for entry-level and even mid-range gaming PC builds. We'll go through the best Ryzen 5600 gaming PC build, including the best memory for Ryzen 5600, the best motherboards for Ryzen 5600, the best graphics card for Ryzen 5600, the best coolers for Ryzen 5600, and we'll consider the best CPU and GPU combos for your money. Remember, if you get value out of the video, please give it a like because it makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, giving you a powerful online platform to create your own website. Create a community with powerful blogging tools and integrated comment system, and display your latest social media posts. Connect with your audience and generate revenue through members-only content. Manage members, send emails, and leverage audience insights in one easy-to-use platform. And e-commerce is easy with inventory management, product promotion, and streamlined bookkeeping. Visit squarespace.com/PCBuilder to sign up for a free trial and get 10% off your first purchase. Originally launched in 2020, the Ryzen 5600 is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU based on AMD's Zen 3 architecture that retails for about $125 to $150. The 5600X, it's a slightly higher clocked version that can be found for about $165, though the overall performance doesn't differ much from the Ryzen 5600. In terms of performance versus its closest competitors in gaming, the Ryzen 5600 is roughly equivalent to Intel's i5-12400, which at the time of this video retails for about $160. Paired with a mid-range or faster GPU, the Ryzen 5600 is about 10% faster than the i3-12100F or 13100F, which retail for between $100 and $120. Going up in price, its main competitors are the Ryzen 7600 for about $230 and the i5-13400 for about $210. Now, while those CPUs have stronger performance with higher-end GPUs, overall, the Ryzen 5600 has the strongest price to performance of any CPU on the market, especially when you consider the wider range of affordable motherboards and DDR4 RAM. So what's the best GPU for the Ryzen 5600? Well, remember, when designing a gaming PC, particularly with a tighter budget, we want to spend as much money as we can getting the fastest graphics card that we can afford, and then we just want to get a CPU that won't bottleneck it. And it usually makes sense if you have extra money to upgrade to the next GPU tier than upgrading the CPU. That is until we get to much faster and more expensive graphics cards. Now, price to performance, that's where the Ryzen 5600 really shines. And at the lower end, I'd recommend any new graphics card from Radeon RX 6600, Intel Arc A750, or RTX 3050, or faster graphics card. If you do plan on going with a cheaper used graphics card, then I'd probably drop the CPU down to either a Ryzen 5500 or an Intel i3-12100F just to save every last dollar possible and put that back into my graphics card. But if you're going with a new GPU, then the Ryzen 5600 is a very good investment, and I'd push that GPU all the way up to an RTX 4070 Ti or RX 7900 XT at about the $800 range before I reach for a faster CPU like the Ryzen 5800 X3D, Ryzen 7600, or faster Ryzen 7000 CPU. So what's the best motherboard for the Ryzen 5600? Well, I'll leave a link to our recent best motherboards for Ryzen down in the video description. First, let's briefly talk about the BIOS. Because any AM4 motherboard, and specifically we're talking about B550 and X570 motherboards, along with the older Ryzen boards like the 300 and 400 series, they will work with the Ryzen 5600 and 5600X, as long as it has the correct BIOS update, which can be downloaded from the board manufacturer's website. The challenge, of course, it's making sure that the BIOS that comes on the motherboard out of the box that you buy isn't an old BIOS. Now, the good news is that most B550 and X570 motherboards have BIOS flashback, so you can download the latest BIOS and update the board without a compatible CPU. Also, the Ryzen 5600X, it's been out now for about 3 years, so I suspect that virtually every B550 or X570 sold brand new will come with a compatible BIOS out of the box. But for the Ryzen 5600, I would be slightly more cautious as it just came out in the middle of 2022. So while I think you're probably safe to buy any B550 or X570 motherboard now for the 5600X or 5600, just know that buying a motherboard that has BIOS flashback, which again allows you to update the BIOS without a compatible CPU, will definitely guarantee compatibility. Now, in the past, I've recommended B550 motherboards over X570 ones for Ryzen 5000 gaming builds, due to their lower prices. But I've recently seen several X570 motherboards for about the same price as B550s, so it probably doesn't matter anymore. The only real difference is that while B550 motherboards have their main GPU and one of the M.2 storage slots running at PCIe Gen 4, X570 motherboards include at least one additional M.2 storage slot, which also runs at PCIe Gen 4. I would stay away from B450 and A520 motherboards if you can. They lack PCIe Gen 4, which might be important for future GPUs, and they really don't offer any additional price savings. So a B550 or X570 motherboard with BIOS flashback is what we're focused on. There's a number of ultra-budget B550s like the Gigabyte B550M DS3H and MSI Pro VDH Wi-Fi, but if you want better audio and better features, you'll typically need to step up to the $140 to $180 price range for boards like the Aorus Elite B550, the Asus TUF Gaming B550, or the MSI Tomahawk B550. I'll leave a list of the motherboards that I'd consider down in the video description, and you can check out pricing and availability in your region. So what's the best RAM for the Ryzen 5600? Well, RAM speed matters the most when our CPU is the bottleneck. So if we're driving a lot of FPS at lower resolutions or quality settings. And the RAM matters a lot less when we have a weaker GPU, or if we're at 1440p or 4K, or at very high details and then driving fewer FPS, because we're much more likely to be bottlenecked by our graphics card instead. Now, DDR4 RAM, which is the only RAM the Ryzen 5600 uses, is stupidly cheap right now at the time of this video, so much so that I'm recommending a 2x8GB kit of DDR4 3600CL16 for just around $55. Now, you can go a bit cheaper to a 2x8GB 3200CL16 or similar speed 3600CL18 for around $35. And if that helps you jump up to the next GPU tier, certainly consider it. Also note that many Ryzen 5600 CPUs are going to struggle to run RAM kits faster than 3600CL16, so my strong advice is to consider that your ceiling and avoid faster kits, which aren't going to give you any additional performance, but they might cause compatibility issues. Just remember to go in the BIOS and activate the XMP or DOCP profile on the RAM to run it at its full rated speed. If you want a deeper dive into how RAM speed works, we have a whole video on the best RAM for gaming, which I'll leave linked down in the video description below. Let's talk about the best cooler for the Ryzen 5600. Now, both the Ryzen 5600 and 5600X come with the included Race Stealth box cooler, and it's absolutely fine to get you going. For about $20 to $35 more, you can get slightly more performance by upgrading the cooler to at least a budget tower air cooler to maximize performance under load, run the system cooler overall, and reduce system noise. Now, most 4 heat pipe budget tower air coolers will give you all you need, and here I'll include a link to my recent best coolers for Ryzen video. A couple of suggestions that I really like are the id Cooling SE214XT, which comes in black or white with RGB, the Thermalright Assassin X, or the high performance Deepcool AK400. Now, given this is a budget CPU, I'd recommend sticking to an air cooler for best price to performance and spending any extra money on upgrading our graphics card instead. Let's talk about the best SSD for the Ryzen 5600. Basically, there's no gaming benefit from using anything faster than even a SATA SSD right now. That being said, PCIe Gen 3 M.2 NVMe drives like this are now cheaper than SATA SSDs, and there's no fuss with cable management. So that's what we're going to focus on today. There are a number of great budget M.2 NVMe SSDs like the Silicon Power A60, the Team Group MP33, and other budget drives. I'll leave links to a couple in the video description. My advice, just get the cheapest one. Just remember, if you do get a PCIe Gen 4 NVMe SSD, you will need a B550 or X570 motherboard to run it at the full rated speed. In terms of how much storage space you need for a gaming build, I typically recommend at least 500 gigabytes of storage space. That being said, right now, the best price to performance in terms of storage tends to be 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte drives, which you can find for as little as $100. For the PC case, what we're looking for here is good airflow at an affordable price. Now, I really like the Deepcool CK560, which comes with 3 included ARGB fans and 1 non-RGB rear fan for just $89. We built our Ryzen 5800X 3D gaming build in it, and it was awesome. There's also good value budget cases like the Roswell S500, which for just $55 comes with 4 included ARGB fans and uses a bottom airflow configuration. It's a little unusual, but it works just fine as long as you don't put the PC on thick shag carpet, and you can reconfigure it for side intake airflow instead if you like. The Antec NX410 is another great ARGB option with 3 fans for between $70 and $80. And if you're looking for ultra budget, I do like the Zalman S2 and S3 with 3 included non-RGB fans and a glass side panel for as little as $50. Though 2 of the fans are Molex. I'll leave a list of great value cases in the video description below, and you can check out pricing and availability in your region. Okay, let's talk about PSUs. If you haven't seen our updated How to Buy a PSU guide, we cover how to size and buy the best unit for your build based on unit quality, rather than the nonsensical 80+ ratings. For an entry-level to mid-range build with a very power-efficient Ryzen 5600 or 5600X, I'd recommend getting any PSU that's at least C tier or better, as rated on the PSU Cultist list, and then sizing the PSU at 1.5 times the max rated draw in PC Part Picker. But if you're going with a higher end GPU like an RX 7900 XT or RTX 4070 Ti, then I would consider bumping up that PSU to a B tier or better. Let's take a look at a couple of builds. We'll take a look at budget builds, kind of mid-range 1440p, and a 4K gaming build for about $1,200, and we'll compare it to its competitors in terms of the i5-12400, as well as some faster CPUs as well. To give you a sense of the price efficiency of the Ryzen 5600 and kind of where you should be landing. So let's take a look first at the budget build. So we're mostly focused here on high FPS 1080p or anywhere from 60, maybe 80 FPS at 1440p, decent settings in most titles. Obviously some titles like Cyberpunk, you're gonna have to turn down to 1080p, but pretty good performer overall. We're starting off with the Ryzen 5600 going for $142 right now, a little higher than it's been. Bounces typically between about $120 and $145. Not a bad price for it though right now. And the motherboard we're going to go with is the ASRock B550 MPG Riptide. It's got entry-level audio. It's effectively an entry-level board, but very, very good VRMs on it. $99 right now. You say, Jason, I thought you needed a board with BIOS flashback. Typically you do, but this board actually released after the Ryzen 5600, so it automatically came with a BIOS that works with the 5600 on it, which is really, really good. Remember, we'll leave links down in the video description to all the boards that I would recommend at each kind of budget tier. We're just going to go for the cheapest 2x8 GB DDR4 3200 CL16 memory kit right now for $35 as Silicon Power A60. If you want RGB, about $10 more will get you RGB. Obviously, we're going with the included stock cooler here. No reason to up that right now. And for the drive, I mean, there's some really great sales right now on drives. This is actually a PCIe Gen 4 drive, 500 gigabytes, M.2 NVMe, on sale for only $25. This is kind of a super sale right now. Typically, you'll find PCIe Gen 3 drives here. Remember, we're just getting a budget drive about 500 gigs or larger. $25 is pretty insane. But the graphics card is really the thing that makes this go. So I went with the ASRock RX 6650 XT, 8 gigabytes of VRAM on it. Now you can of course go with something like the Intel Arc, which is $10 cheaper right now. Similar performance level of the 6650 XT. 6650 XT is slightly faster. So if that Arc gets down to like $220 where it had been, I definitely look at snap that up. NVIDIA options are really tough here. You're probably looking at a 2060 for a lot less performance for about $270, $280. I already mentioned the Roswell Prism S500 case, really good deal. $54 right now over at Newegg, and you can see the 3 ARGB fans on the bottom one here. There are side intakes. You can obviously just move the fans if you want to go side intake instead of bottom intake. And then power supply, this is a C tier rated unit, kind of just the cheapest unit right now. PSUs has come up in price a little bit as I'm filming this. $54. These PSUs would normally be more like $35. Hopefully the price will come back down, but right now this is just the cheapest C tier rated one, that 600 watts. We don't even need 600 watts. It's just the cheapest one. Why pay more for less wattage, right? So overall, $672. Really, really good performer here, and you can start PC gaming right away. Let's take a quick look at a comparison build for an i5-12400F. I was really happy. It looks like Intel is actually cutting the price on these CPUs. Just a week or so ago, this was a $184 CPU. You can see right now $157 out of stock right now at Amazon, but $157, that's a very good price for the CPU. That being said, same performance as the Ryzen 5600, so why would you pay more money? It does come with an included box cooler that's absolutely adequate for it, just like the Ryzen 5600 does. Again though, not sure why you pay more for the same performance. The other big challenge is the motherboard selection for the i5-12400. We found some of the cheaper B660 and H670 motherboards did not run it at the full frequency. They did not run it at the full boost frequency. They ran it at a lower boost frequency, so you got lower performance. So unless you're willing to go out and test a couple boards yourself, you're gonna have to buy boards that we know do run it at the full frequency, and they tend to be more expensive. They tend to start about the $120 to $140 range. You can also buy some Z-Series motherboards right now for about $140. Another thing to take a look at. And finally, I will say, people have had trouble on the B660 and H670 boards getting faster RAM than 3400 to run on it. So if you do get this, you're probably going to want to get the cheaper RAM as well. All told, this build comes out with the same rest of the parts for $706. Ryzen 5600, definitely a better price to performance option. But what if you want to get high FPS at 1440p? We're talking about 100 FPS in most titles at good settings. Here's a build for you for $850. I think really highlights, again, the price efficiency of the 5600. So the GPU that we're going to go with here is the RX 6700 XT, $350 right now. It's a good price for it. Again, we are still waiting for AMD to release the rest of their Radeon RX 7000 lineup. We're waiting for a 4060. The 4070 just came out actually the week that I'm shooting this right now. Not the greatest price, but also not terrible. Another GPU we can definitely take a look at. And this is going to get us 100 FPS in those games. The rest of the build is pretty similar, but we've changed a couple of things. We've added an aftermarket cooler. We went with id Cooling SE214 XT for just $20. Really phenomenal heatsink, 4 heat pipes on it, ARGB. Just add a little bit of bling. Also add a little bit of additional cooling to the system. Either make it less noisy or pump up the performance just a hair. For the motherboard, we've spent about $50 more, and we've gone with the Asus TUF Gaming B550 Pro. This has upgraded audio on it. Overall, just a really phenomenal motherboard. It's got a number of M.2 slots on it. And honestly, if you're looking to kind of up your game in terms of the overall system and enjoyment package, this is definitely one area I would consider spending more money, especially if you can get better audio for it. For the RAM, we spent another, $15 here, and we went with the G.Skill Ripjaw DDR4 3600 CL16. This is a 16 gigabyte kit, a 2x8 gigabyte kit. Again, $51 for this kit. That's the kit that you saw on the desk right now. It's a phenomenal kit. I don't know what else to say about it, but for $52, this seems to make a lot of sense. Alternatively, we could have gone more like 32 gigs at the slower speed for about $60. Another way to go, you can always add more RAM later. Remember, it's got 4 DIMM slots. I would just go ahead and grab this and get a slight performance bump. The rest of the build is the same. So for $850, look at that. We've got a 1440p 100 plus FPS in most titles. Great build. This is something that I think anybody could build right now and have a great time gaming. We've already compared to the i5-12400 on the budget level. So let's take a look at going up in terms of CPU power to something like the Ryzen 7600. Now you can see it's ballooned the cost, $1,023 to get the same level of performance. It's almost $200, $180 or so. What happened? Well, the Ryzen 7600 actually pretty reasonably priced. In fact, just got a price cut, looks like, to $219. Does come with an included stock cooler we can use, as long as we don't want to use Precision Boost Overdrive or anything that's going to help performance. So it really does make a lot of sense to go ahead and up the cooler on this as well. So we just use like for like cooler. We went with the id Cooling SE214 XT on it, but the motherboard and the RAM is really where we're sinking a lot of money. Now you can go with a cheaper budget motherboard, but if you want anything with upgraded audio on it, those boards start at $230. I think it's a travesty. I hope these boards do come down. And when they do, eventually the 5600, maybe in a year or 2 or 3 years, will become replaced by the 7600. But honestly, not right now in my estimation. $229 gets you a really good motherboard. I do like this board. MSI's had a little bit harder time with RAM compatibility, but we went with a relatively kind of medium speed kit, DDR5 5200 CL36 for $70. This is a 2x8 gigabyte kit. I'd look to maybe spend about $90 here. You can get a 5600 CL36. That tends to be about the sweet spot for Ryzen 7000. But again, that would be even more money. Then we'd definitely be spending $200 plus for roughly the same level of performance with our RX 6700 XT. There's not going to be a lot of difference. So honestly, to me, the 5600 just makes so much sense at this price point. Finally, let's jump into a 4K gaming build. Now this one's $1,200 because I decided to go with the just released RTX 4070 12 gigabyte card for $599. I know there are AMD cards that actually deliver better performance cheaper right now, like the RX 6950 XT, which you can get for just about the same price, or you can get the 6800 XT, which you can get for about $515, but they're all within that same ballpark. So this is a pretty good comparison. I've upgraded the cooler here to the Deep Cool AG400. The AK400 also good, but the AG400 comes with ARGB, which I do really like. Higher performance than the other one, so it's just gonna run a little quieter, a little cooler. Not necessary if you don't wanna spend the extra 10 bucks. And then of course we've gone with the same board. I have gone with an RGB RAM kit here. I went with a Kingston Fury Renegade RGB. This is a 2x8 GB kit, $60 right now. It's just so insanely cheap. DDR4, it's so insanely cheap, it's just hard to ignore. I also did upgrade the drive. I upgraded to a 1TB SSD. We went with the Silicon Power A60 for only $43. Now you could get for about $85, you can go ahead and get 2 TB if you want, just another 40 bucks. Storage is so cheap right now. Jump on it, and it's just getting cheaper, honestly. We went with a slightly nicer case as well. I went with the Deep Cool CK560. Again, 3 front ARGB fans. We use this in our 5800X 3D gaming build. Remember, you can upgrade this PC to a 5800X 3D in the future. You're probably going to be able to find one of those chips very, very cheap in 2 years' time. Just absolutely insane upgrade paths. The other thing I did is I went with a higher tier PSU. So I went with an A tier rated PSU, same effective wattage, 650 watts. This is the Animax Revolution, just a better PSU because we're using a higher end graphics card now. So for $1,206, again, we've premiumed out a lot of the rest of the build. We could have probably done this quite a bit cheaper if we'd kind of gone with those other components, but for $1,206, you will get a build that is capable of playing 4K games in just about every title right now. Pretty insane value. Let's quickly compare it to a 13400 build. Not quite as performant as 7600, especially with DDR4 RAM, but will give us slightly more performance than the 5600, but at a price premium, $1,323, $120-ish more. That almost gets us to a 4070 Ti or RX 7900 XT. Let's quickly go through the build. Why have I chosen this? We will have a 13400 build guide coming relatively soon in the near future. You can check that out in the video description. I'll put it there once it's up and live. i5 13400F, $210. A little expensive in my estimation for the performance you get over this, especially as compared to the Ryzen 7600. Does come with an included box cooler. I recommend replacing it. It doesn't quite give us enough cooling for this CPU. It's got more E-cores than the 12400 does. And the box cooler we went with is the Deep Cool AG400. Same one, we went with the 5600. $30, perfectly adequate for it. Now, if you want to go like for like on the motherboards and you want to get something with upgraded audio, right now, at least in the US, B and H series motherboards are like $200 for those features. Doesn't make any sense. You can get a Z series motherboard instead, like the ASRock Z690 Extreme with Wi-Fi for $170. It has all the features you need. It's got ALC 1220 audio on it. I would definitely go this route. We went with the same RAM kit, effectively the same overall build, except the i5 13400 does require more power. It just was right on the edge there, so I decided to bump up to a 750 watt unit. Again, A tier rated unit, $120 instead of the $89. So overall, for this system, $1,323. Probably should have spent our money right here, going up to that 4070 Ti or 7900 XT instead. Check out the link to our sponsor, Squarespace, for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. Links for everything are down in the video description. And remember, if you got value out of the video, please give it a like, as it makes a huge difference to the channel, especially this guy right here. And of course, subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. If you're looking for how to build a gaming PC, I'll put that up right here. You can check it out step by step. And we also have a video on how to set up your PC after you build right here. Check them both out, and we'll catch you on the next one. You bit me.